Monica Tucker is a certified John Maxwell Coach as well as a health advocate. Monica is very active in Toastmasters International as a current district officer, and she does educational presentations for the local Alzheimer's Association. During her Toastmasters affiliation, she learned about active listening and realized that most people listen to respond and don't listen to the conversation, meanings, and signals.
We just went through an exercise about listening. And do you hear what I hear? Because I was giving everyone the same instructions, but it was like everyone was hearing it a little differently. Has that ever happened to you when you've communicated with someone? You thought everything was very clear. There was no questions asked. And at the end of the conversation, you're like, I'm not sure they got what I was telling them. And sometimes you really get a good indication of that. So, hearing versus listening. You heard all of my instructions. You followed all of those instructions. And hearing it and actually listening to what I was saying, there was no different there. But if we were communicating, like when you have your screen on, I can get cues from you. A lot of times if you're talking to people, you will notice that they're indicating that they do hear what you're saying. So a lot of times people, they can hear you, but are they really listening to what you're saying? And in our world today, we have a lot of distractions, a lot of things that interrupt that listening skill. And it goes back and defaults to the hearing. I can hear you just fine, but am I listening to what you're saying? We have, if you look at this guy and this lady up in the top, multitasking. Multitasking is not a good thing. It distracts you from everything. It keeps you from really engaging, and you're not really hearing. You're hearing it, but you're not listening to what is being done. So if you're doing 2 or 3 tasks at a time, do you do them effectively? Can you actually do them and to the best of your ability? If you can, you've got a very great skill. You need to cash in on that because most people cannot multitask and do everything effectively. So it's better to slow down, concentrate on one, and then move to the next. We also have, these lovely little tools, cell phones, technology, computers, Zoom. So we are distracted nonstop with cell phones. If you've ever been in a restaurant, and this is one of my husband's favorite pet peeves, to go in a restaurant, you'll see it, well, when we could go in a restaurant, pre-COVID, and you could see people sitting around a table, 4, 5, 6 people, all of them on their cell phone. And sometimes they'd be texting each other and sitting right beside the same people. And you're like, I've had my nieces and nephews do that, and I'm like, I don't get this at all. Put the cell phones on the table. We're going to have a conversation now. Most people don't want to put that cell phone down. They want to look at Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is nowadays. There's so many varieties now that it's hard to capture attention and have people really listening to the conversation. So it's a skill that we're losing over time, especially with all the electronics that we have. And then the lady at the bottom, she just has way too much going on, way too much going on. She's got her computer, she's running out of time. She's got all kinds of meetings going on. So, you know, she's not listening to anything you're saying. So all of these distractions add up over our conversations throughout the day. And if you're really trying to communicate with someone, it gets frustrating for you as well. So there's 5 stages to active listening. When you engage in a conversation with someone, you want to be sure you're receiving the message that they're giving you. That's part of obtaining all the information. That's one of the stages. The next stage is understanding. Do you understand what they're communicating to you? Now, one of the best ways to really know if that understanding is there is to paraphrase it back to them and maybe put it in your words and make sure that you're communicating on the same level, that you are understanding what they're telling you in that conversation. And the next part of it is remembering. Most people remember if they're enjoying the conversation. Sometimes those communications are not all that pleasant, and you'll remember those as well. But you want to make sure you get something take away during the conversation that you can remember that conversation. Have you ever walked away from someone, you've been engaged in a conversation, and you'll go, I have no clue what we just talked about. You were thinking either about what you were going to say while they were talking to you, or you were trying to remember something that you wanted to ask them, or something, a point you wanted to make. And by doing that, you were getting rid of the conversation and the active listening that should have been going on. You were actually in a different moment trying to get back to where, okay, let me ask you this question, versus listening to what they're saying, really understanding it, and then you can remember it. And then you want to evaluate what you've heard. You want to, this stage of listening is part of the learning process. If you get to this stage and you're doing an evaluation and you ask the questions, this is your time to ask the questions, and then you go into the responding. And that way you have a one-on-one conversation. Now, when we're in person, in an active meeting, in a room with people, if we get back to that point, hopefully we will, you get cues from people, body language. You see if they're interested or if they're distracted. They pick up that cell phone. That's a telltale sign somebody's not paying attention. Or they will start doodling on paper, or they will maybe start having a conversation with a person next to you, which is very distracting for somebody if they're trying to speak. Now, when we're in virtual environment, if you guys have your cameras turned off, all those cues go away. So it's almost like I'm doing a presentation to the screen, and I don't really have those cues to work off of. But now, if you're having a conversation or if you're in a meeting, I would suggest, especially if there's engagement that is required, leave your cameras on. And then that way the speaker or the person speaking on screen can gauge the interest, because you'll have head noddings, or you'll have a smile, or you'll have an indication that they are listening and they want to learn about whatever you're speaking about. And if you're doing a live presentation, it makes it a little easier for the person speaking too, because then they can gauge, well, yes, they find that interesting. Let's talk about that a little more. No, I think we need to move on. So it gives them cues as to how to do their presentation. And when I was going through this, and I really thought this was very interesting, this is called the cone of learning. And this is Edgar Dale, and it was created in the 1960s. And after 2 weeks, this is kind of how we tend to remember things. And the reason I found this interesting is because I like to read a lot, and I really didn't get this until I saw this cone of learning. 10% is what I remember of what I read, but that's a passive form. So as long as you stay in a passive form, your learning tendencies are lower. So the next one is hearing the words. So if you're hearing like an audiobook or something, you're probably going to remember about 20% of that. And then if you're seeing it like a movie or a video or something like that, you're going to remember 30%. But then if you put in more active engagement, you can get more out of it, like you're watching a demo. When I worked at the Space and Rocket Center many years ago, we would do live demos for people during demonstrations or during speeches. And I think it resonated with, especially children. They carried away a lot of knowledge with them, and they really, that hands-on watching things being done, you remember things better. And if you're participating in a discussion or giving a talk, that gives you more to remember, because you're wanting to make sure you're conveying everything to the person or the group that you're talking to. So you do more prep work ahead of time. You probably practice a few times, which is always good. And then if you're doing a dramatic presentation, or you're actually going out and simulating some real experience, you have 90% of that that you remember, because it's very actively engaged then. And I really like that quote from Confucius: I see and I forget. I hear and I remember. I do and I understand. And that is definitely true in a lot of things. And listening is one of those that you will need to do and understand in order to remember and engage. And Stephen Covey, I have read many of his books throughout the year. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Have you been in those conversations where somebody's talking to you and then you're thinking, okay, I need to tell them this, or I need to talk about this, or I need to ask about this? You're not really listening to what they are conveying to you. And if you want to learn or understand it, then you need to stop and listen. And over the next couple of weeks, I want to challenge you as you go through conversations with people, and it doesn't have to be serious conversations, just, engaged conversations, whether it's via Zoom or one-on-one if you're engaged or near anyone like that. Stop and see if you're listening to what they're saying and if you're listening to understand, and then use some of those tools to engage them. Paraphrase it back to them. See if they have any questions. That's always a good way to gauge whether someone is listening to what you're conveying and talking about, or if they're just waiting to reply, or if they've got a whole different subject they want to talk about. And that definitely is, they need to listen to what they're communicating as well. Communication. The speaker is also needing to understand what the listener is actually trying to get out of it.
Hello, my name is Heather McCain, and I'm president of the Huntsville, North Alabama chapter of the Society for Technical Communication. We are known locally as STCNA. First, STCNA is the leading professional resource for technical communicators in North Alabama. It was formed as a chapter in 1959. Second, STC advances the arts and sciences of technical communication. STC members come from various industries and roles, and members can join local chapters and special interest groups, or SIGs. Third, STC membership provides opportunities for ongoing learning and professional networking. Members have access to a society member roster, a job bank, and an annual salary survey. Educational webinars and online courses are available to members for free or at a reduced cost. There is an annual STC 2020 Summit Conference, which brings professional technical communicators together for a week of networking and learning, and 2020 was entirely virtual. And locally, we have meetings from January through December, except for the summer months. Prior to April of this year, our meetings were on location, but we are changing to have more of an online meeting presence. Lastly, there is an event coordinated by Dr. Ryan Weber for UAH and the STCNA. It is called the Rocket City Technical Communication Mini-Con. This event focuses on networking and learning from professionals in our local community. So we hope to see you at an STC meeting in the future. If you would like more information, please contact us through our website. And remember that STCNA partners with volunteers to help them build their careers. Thank you.